From White Hat Magazine, I'm Chrisella Herzog, and welcome to Bosses Who Brunch. Here at Bosses Who Brunch, we don't buy into the entrepreneurship myth of overnight success. We cover the challenges, celebrate the successes, and talk about what skills and resources are really needed to start a business. On this episode of Bosses Who Brunch, I sat down with Priyanka Bakaya at Barba Coffee in downtown Salt Lake City. Priyanka is the founder of PK Clean, a company that she started at MIT, moved to Salt Lake City, and then built to a point where Steve Case invested in the company on his Rise of the Rest tour. PK Clean solves the problem of plastic waste entering the landfill by taking plastic, including plastic that can't be recycled normally, and turning it into fuel. Bosses Who Brunch is a project by White Hat Magazine and is supported by our readers and listeners. If you would like to support the podcast, sign up to become a member at whitehatmag.com/subscribe. Priyanka, thank you so much for being here with us today at La Barba and getting a cup of coffee with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So tell us about PK Clean. What do you guys do?
Sure, so PK Clean, we convert plastic waste, which can't be recycled, and we convert it into high-value fuels such as diesel. So people don't realize, but plastic comes from fuel to begin with. So essentially what we're doing is reversing that process. And also what people don't realize is that very little plastic gets recycled in the US, only 9% gets recycled. So there's a huge amount that's going to landfill. And what PK Clean does is provide a solution for that non-recycled plastic waste to at least be converted into something usable, like energy, instead of just sitting in landfills for hundreds of years.
So why doesn't that plastic get recycled?
So yeah, plastic, it's very difficult to recycle it. If you've looked at the bottom of your plastic containers, there's 7 different numbers associated with plastics, and in order to recycle it, you need a pure stream of one type of plastic. And once it gets all mixed up, it becomes very difficult to separate it. So for the traditional recycling process, when you put things in your blue bins, they're very good at separating out number 1 plastics, which are the water bottles, soda bottles, that PET plastic, and then number 2 plastics, things like HDPE bottles, the foggy milk bottles, things that are just very common, do get recycled, but there's just a lot of mixed wastes, whether it's plastic bags or thin film or yogurt containers, takeout packaging, where it's different numbers, it's just not as uniform as those bottles, and it's difficult for them to really separate it out into pure streams. And a process like ours doesn't need the plastics to be in pure streams. It can be mixed. What we're doing is taking the plastic down to its basic molecular form, so it's okay for it to be mixed.
Cool.
Different plastic types.
Yeah. So even somebody, if they're very conscientious about putting all of your plastics into recycling, it's not all going to the recycling.
Yeah, I mean they do the best they can, but at some point it's just you can't sort of sit there looking at each bottle and checking the numbers. So it is a difficult task, and that's where we've sort of found this solution.
Yeah. That's very cool. How did you get the inspiration for this idea?
Yeah, for me, it's sort of been like a lifelong journey. I've always been really passionate about the environment. Growing up was, very conscientious. I grew up in Australia and just, really conscientious about recycling. And when I came to the US, I was sort of struck by sort of the attitudes towards waste was a little bit different here. The other big influence growing up was a close family friend of ours who was an inventor. His name was Percy Keane, and he spent his life just developing alternative energy technologies in Australia. And he had been a bachelor his whole life, converted his house into this giant chemistry lab.
Oh, cool.
So I was really fascinated by him. He would show me oil samples, which he had created out of different materials, and I didn't understand it at the time growing up, but I thought it was really cool. Later, when I left Australia, and I later studied at Stanford, and I was looking back at what was he doing. I started sort of putting the pieces together and realizing maybe there's something to this. And so when I was in grad school at MIT, I really sort of dug into his work, and
that's very cool.
That was the inspiration behind PK Clean, and that's why we named PK Clean. after him.
After him?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Is he involved in your company at all?
No, so he was elderly.
Oh,
he was
okay.
sort of like a grandfather figure, and he passed away in 2007. He was age 95, so he was quite elderly.
Wow.
But we had all the chemistry notes that we were sort of his closest family friends, and he left it all to my family, and that got us started.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, what a story. I'm sorry for your loss with that. Okay, so tell me a little bit about the process. How does this breaking down of plastic work?
Sure. So how it works is we take the mixed, dirty landfill-bound plastic waste. It comes to us in bales usually. We shred it into just small pieces, sort of like confetti, and we feed it into our process. The key is we don't want any oxygen in our reactor system because once you have oxygen, you create dioxins, and you might be familiar with incineration, where you're actually burning the plastic. That's not as an effective way of getting energy out of the plastic, because you create various dioxins, and it's not as efficient. So the key to our process is no oxygen, oxygen-free chamber, and we're just taking the plastic using thermal cracking, using heat. We're just breaking the plastic down. It goes into a liquid form until it eventually becomes a vapor.
Okay.
And then from that vapor form, we cool the vapors to the boiling points of the fuels we want. So if we want diesel, we go for the boiling point of diesel. And basically, plastic are these long carbon chains in the thousands, and diesel is C12 to C20, so we're just breaking down those carbon chains until we get that fuel. And
Wow.
so at the end, you get about 70 to 80% becomes the liquid fuel, about 10 to 20% becomes a hydrocarbon gas, which we can use to heat the system. So once the system is started, we have enough energy to keep it going. And then whatever sort of waste material is in there, organic, labels and food, comes out as a char.
Oh, okay.
And so about 5% will come out as a
Wow.
char. Yeah.
Now you said that you use the hydrocarbons to fuel the system. So is the system self-sustainable?
Yeah, once you kickstart it, the plastic basically provides its own energy.
Wow.
So we see plastic as batteries. They contain all this valuable fuel. When you throw stuff away, people think, okay, this is just waste, but it actually contains really valuable energy.
Yeah. Wow. And so compared to traditional recycling methods, is your system more energy sustainable than traditional recycling methods?
So, traditional recycling is quite energy intensive, but the sort of positive thing about recycling is you're making new products out of it. So we see ourselves as sort of more last resort, where you can't make new products, where you're going into the fuel. Now the fuel can be sent to refinery to become new plastic, so we can close the loop in that way.
Okay.
And, that is an option, but like once you burn the fuel, if you put it into a vehicle, for instance, it just sort of disappears. So we at the end of the day, even though it is really energy, efficient, it's we still see it as sort of try to recycle whatever you can.
Yeah.
And then we'll do whatever can't be
Interesting.
recycled.
Yeah. And so does it just produce diesel, or is that what ends up happening to the fuel that you guys produce?
Yeah, so we can make different types of fuels, and it just depends on the local market, what makes sense. And when we started out, oil prices were over 100. We were just sort of making a mixed sort of crude product that could be a refinery input. And over time, we've sort of altered the process to make different fuels. But yeah, the same equipment, just running under different temperatures and conditions, we can make different like heating oils, diesel fuels, whatever. It's
Very
just sort
cool.
of the carbon chain length.
Yeah. That is fascinating. Very cool. Before I ask my next question, your hair is kind of brushing the mic. I don't want it to just make it like that squishing sound. There is squishing sound.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and you have your gosh, what am I trying to say? Sorry. Your facilities to process this plastic, they're not just located in the U.S., they're all over the place, aren't they?
Well, yeah. Right now our facility is in Salt Lake City. That's our first one. The next one we're setting up next year is going to be in Canada.
Okay.
And then beyond that, we're looking at different geographies.
Okay.
This in.
Yeah. So why Salt Lake City? What do you like about Salt Lake City's environment that you started up here?
Yeah, so we started out, I was at MIT when I started, and then we were in a VC incubator in California and deciding where to set up the first facility. And Utah just sort of made sense on a lot of different levels. We had initially a research agreement with the University of Utah, and they have a lot of expertise in this area, and that's really what got us sort of off the ground and started, was working at they have sort of a industrial research facility, and we built our first pilot plant there and tested it. And once we were in the ecosystem, we realized this is a great place to get things fabricated locally. You have sort of the refineries, so you have a lot of good sort of fabrication companies that are geared towards supplying equipment for the refineries. Obviously, the refineries are there for the oil offtake. There's the plastic waste that's produced locally. So it was just a good combination of
good
things.
energy ecosystem here.
And just, I think it's the right sized place in terms of getting sort of interaction with city and state, and just like a very business friendly environment
That's
here.
good.
So the pieces just sort of made sense, and we're glad that we ended up here.
Yeah. Have you found a lot of support from local governments for what you're doing?
Yeah, we've been really impressed. So our first bit of funding was from Salt Lake City Economic Development Loan Fund.
Oh, great.
And that sort of kick-started us to start building our facility. And so that was at the city level, and then at the state level, we've worked with GoEd, the TCIP program, and their grants there have really helped us achieve into some commercialization. So we've been really super impressed with the city and state and how supportive they've been. Really grateful for them.
That's very cool. I'm glad they've been so supportive. And for our listeners, just who don't know, GoEd is the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and TCIP is, you'll have to remember.
Technology, Commercialization, and Innovation Program.
Okay, I knew that the last three letters, couldn't remember the first. Yeah, and they're great resources here in Utah. Yeah, and so with Salt Lake City, last I talked to you, you guys were starting a program to put bags out with the recycling programs. Did that end up taking off?
No, unfortunately, we couldn't get enough local support for that. But hopefully in the future, they're doing some pilots in other parts of the country. So we're hoping.
Well, good luck with that. I hope sometimes it's just not the right time for things. So
exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, and in some very cool recent news, Steve Case's Rise of the Rest tour came to Salt Lake City, and they had a pitch competition here, and you ended up winning that pitch competition and an investment from Steve Case. So that is very cool. What has that been like, and what's the process been like since winning that?
Yeah, no, that was came as a really great surprise. We sort of thought, okay, let's participate in this. It's probably a lot of software, internet, tech companies, and we're going to be different. And
I actually was surprised at the diversity of companies that they had up there. So
yeah, I mean, we were definitely very different from the rest because of doing clean energy. And Steve Case obviously comes from an internet background and doesn't traditionally do clean energy. So we were really surprised that we won, and just really grateful that he sort of saw the big vision of what we were doing in terms of the environmental perspective, and we've really sort of enjoyed interacting with them since. And Steve sort of offered some additional resources from his foundation.
Oh, that's great.
Different ways we can work together. So we're really excited about that.
Oh, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's going well. Well, so just in starting a company, I mean, how long have you guys been working on PK Clean?
So it's been 5 years now.
5 years, okay. Wow, so 5 years. Okay. And in that time, I'm sure you faced some challenges and some great successes too. So I want to talk about the challenges first, because sometimes people don't really talk about that and how hard it actually can be.
Of course,
So what have been some of the challenges you faced, and how do you get past those really hard days?
Yeah, no, tons of ups and downs, and especially something like creating a new technology, a new industry. It's you really hit a lot of walls along the way.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
I think one of our big challenges was just sort of we've had really limited funding from the start, and being able to build a team has been difficult because require people who are passionate enough and willing to take a pay cut.
Yeah.
So that's been definitely one of the consistent challenges from the start, is just sort of finding
people. Yeah. Well, probably people who I would expect have somewhat of a niche expertise, and then you need to recruit them to come to Utah and work for you. And wow.
Yeah. So we've had to go through a lot of people who haven't really worked out, and being able to stick with us for the long term. So that's been challenging, just sort of keeping that knowledge base in the company and finding the right people. And we initially just sort of had a lot of interns from View and recent grads, and they were just sort of very in and out, and we had to sort of change that approach, and we no longer do that because it just ended up being like you train these people and then they leave, and it just creates. So we've learned a lot on the hiring side. I think that's been like a big challenge for us. Is, but right now we're just really happy with our core team, and just more experienced people, really dedicated. Just right now, like our management team, I wouldn't pick like anyone else in the world really.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
So it's an ongoing learning experience in terms of like, building a team and finding the right people. But it's presented as challenges along the way. But,
yeah, and so I mean, to keep going for 5 years. I mean, I imagine there were some days where you thought you were done for, or you just wanted to give up. What do you do on those days?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like for instance, when oil prices just like drastically dropped at the end of last year. When we started out, they were over 100, and end of last year they were like in the $25 to $30 range. That obviously has enormous economic implications on the company.
Yeah.
And we thought, okay, maybe this is it. And what happened at that time was a couple of our main competitors had to discontinue their operations.
Oh wow.
And in a way, we were like, this is probably a good thing because we have like the lowest cost offering in the market. So suddenly this year we became really the only player in the market.
Wow.
Because the lower oil prices, like it was really bad for us, but like at least we were still economic at the lower oil prices, whereas competitors went out of business. And we ended up hiring the CEO, founder, our main competitor, who we'd been really impressed by over the years.
Yeah.
So he's now on our team. So it ended up being, it ended up going from a situation where like, okay, this is it, to, hey, like,
make the best of it.
Make lemonade out of lemons.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I mean, that's just really cool. Like the combination there of just, sticking it out. Sometimes just, waking up in the morning, keeping going is sometimes like the best strategy. Like if you just keep going one more day sort of thing.
And I will say, like if it had just been me by myself, I probably would have given up. I think having like co-founders and, like people on the team to keep me going is, we can always like lift each other up and keep going.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's important to have that support system. And whether it's people on the team, other people in your life, like when you're an entrepreneur, it's tough. It's like you don't want to be on the journey alone. So everyone's gonna have their bad days, and you just have to sort of fans and supporters.
I love that. And then you hired the CEO of your main competitor, and so now you have the knowledge of both of those companies come together at honestly at a much lower cost than if you'd acquired them or something.
Exactly.
That's very cool. So what about any successes or moments that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I think, like when, we've been working on the technology for a while, and for the longest time we weren't really sure, like, how does what we're doing compare to, like, what other people have done. I think just having customers come in who've seen all our competitor systems, because we haven't, been able to actually see what other people have done, but having consistently these customers come in who have seen everything and say, oh, you guys have like the best system out there. I think that's really validating for our engineering team. Who, like as someone on the business side, I get out there and talk to more people on a day-to-day basis, but they don't. And for them, it's just really validating to have people come and say, hey, you guys really have the best solution that we've
That's
seen
cool.
out there.
So what would your advice be to somebody who's just trying to get started, and especially along the lines of trying to keep your team motivated, validating that?
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a long journey, and you just have to take step by step, and it can be overwhelming because there's so much you don't know at the end of the day. But you just have to realize that for every problem that comes along, every hurdle, there's always a solution. Maybe you can't solve it by yourself, but there's always resources out there. So, I'm not like a rocket scientist who can like solve everything myself. And, I definitely have plenty of weaknesses. But if you surround yourself with a team where people can fill in those gaps, and if you sort of have that dedication to like, hey, there's always a way to solve a problem, and you're just really resourceful, then I think that sort of attitude is all you need really at the end of the day. It's not really about like fancy degrees or like anything like that.
It's really about that resilience to keep going. I like that. That's great advice. And so you've mentioned you've had a lot of resources in your journey here. What has been your favorite resource that you would recommend to somebody starting out?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would have to say my father. He's an entrepreneur and has done a range of different things. I was exposed to growing up, and as I've had to start this company, I just keep going back to him for advice on different things. And I think I didn't really appreciate it growing up, but now that I'm sort of in the thick of things, I really rely on his inputs. And sometimes it won't be necessarily that I agree with him, but just the motivation that, to keep going that I get from him. So I think having him, not everyone is going to have a father who's an entrepreneur, but like having some kind of like mentor in your life, who can always go to get advice.
That's very cool.
And give you perspective, and especially when it's someone who's older and been through it, they can give you that long-term perspective. So when you're in those short-term moments, you can sort of take a step back and see the big picture instead of like thinking the world is over.
Oh yeah, I found that very valuable too. Just talking to a couple people, be like, okay, today was a bad day, but it's gonna get better. So yeah.
So having, I think, more of that personal resources, like mentors, are more important.
That support network.
Than like some kind of website like that.
No, that's great advice. So what do the next 5 years look like for you? I know that there are some big changes coming with our, the EPA and environmental policy in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, we're still, we never received any sort of, government incentives on the federal level, and, didn't really rely on that in the way that, other industries like solar have been impacted. But for us, it's just, our mission is to end plastic waste forever, which is a huge goal.
Yeah.
So it's really to get out more of our facilities out there and increase sort of our product offering. We have a certain size right now, and we're trying to, come up with smaller sizes, like different applications. Marine plastic waste is something that we're really passionate about. There's a lot of plastic waste in the ocean, 5 trillion pieces they estimate, and they estimate by 2050 there'll be more plastic than fish in the ocean.
Oh
so
my
it's
gosh.
really a devastating issue, and once the plastic is in the ocean, and in those pieces, really the only thing you can do is convert it into fuel once you collect it. So we've been working with plastic ocean groups on this problem, island communities, beach cleanups, and I think being able to work on that issue in addition to just getting more of our facilities out there is something that we're just really passionate about. So hopefully next 5 years we'll see a lot of growth and getting our technology out there.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that. Is there anything that we or our listeners can do to support you with that?
I mean, if you're in a community where you think this solution could be deployed, definitely reach out to us.
Very cool.
We're trying to get the system out to as many cities across North America and across the world as possible. So we're always interested to hear from people and get local support. And
great.
Our website has a contact form. Definitely feel free to reach out to us.
What is your website?
It's www.pkclean.com.
So just the name of the company. Okay, that's simple. Cool. Well, thank you, Priyanka. This has been great to talk to you today. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, this was great.
Okay,
Thanks
great.
So much,
Well, thank you for coming on the show today and taking the time to talk.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bosses Who Brunch. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Bosses Who Brunch is a production of White Hat Magazine. To keep up on future episodes and meetups, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at White Hat Mag. You can also find more information about White Hat Magazine and Bosses Who Brunch at whitehatmag.com.